Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So, an update about my Jedi bathrobes. I talked to one of my Mandalorian hunter friends, and he actually told me that this is made out of genuine Ewok fur, and I gotta tell you guys, it is so soft and comfortable, which is just another reason why we should be domesticating Ewoks, because they have great meat, and now apparently they have great fur as well. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about the Grand Army of the Republic. The clones were amongst the best soldiers the galaxy had ever seen, but as I've said many times, had Palpy McScrotumface not been playing both sides of the war, the Republic would have lost the war against the Separatists within a year. Today we continue our 10 Flaws series by looking at everything the Grand Army of the Republic did wrong during the Clone Wars. We're not going to be specifically talking about the clones' fighting ability and their weaknesses too much. We looked in depth at their flaws and advantages on our other channel, Generation Films. You guys can check that out over here after you watch this video. The Republic Senate was a mess. Even the most non-partisan issues got caught in a sticky web of bureaucratic political nonsense. Even as region after region seceded from the Republic, it still took the Senate over 2 years to pass the Military Creation Act, which overturned the millennia-old Ruusan Reformation and allowed the Republic to finally field an army. The strange thing is, when one Jedi happens to accidentally stumble upon a secret world that has been hidden by some unknown conspiracy and finds an entire army that's been in production for over 10 years, the Republic Senate embraces this army without even batting an eye, or making one of those subcommittees that they love appointing themselves to. This was highly uncharacteristic for the Republic Senate. There should have been at least an official inquiry into how stable these clones were, or more importantly, shouldn't someone have asked who made them and for what reason, and where did the funding come from? All Obi-Wan Kenobi found out was Lost Jedi Sifo-Dyas was responsible for placing the order. But how did a Jedi who was essentially a monk with no belongings raise all that money in secret? The Jedi Order is relatively rich, but had no part in helping fund this army. A quick investigation could have looked at Sifo-Dyas' closest friends and contacts, including former Jedi Separatist leader Count Dooku. The intergalactic banking clans had not been nationalized by Palpatine yet, but they would still need to cooperate to a certain degree with the Senate investigation because they were a part of the Republic, and some of the key individuals in the investigation, like Sifo-Dyas, was a Jedi who were technically employees of the Republic. Some digging would probably uncover a massive transfer in funds from Count Dooku to Sifo-Dyas. If nothing is found, they could also check out the financial transitions to the Camino cloning facilities. Such an expensive project will have to have a money trail, and eventually will lead investigators to the source of who created this army. Uncharacteristically, the Republic Senate quickly passes the Military Creation Act without really understanding what the clones were. This was due to the discovery of a massive Separatist army. The droid army that the Separatists fielded was huge in number compared to the Republic Judicial Forces and even the Grand Army of the Republic. This is due to cheap, low-quality droids the Separatists were using. While the CIS was much smaller in territory and population compared to the Republic, it was rich in raw resources and industrial worlds. They were able to quickly repurpose their entire manufacturing output to build and supply their military. The first batch of clones was already paid for, but much like a cheap printer, the low upfront costs oftentimes hid extremely expensive maintenance, aka ink costs. Not only did it take a considerably longer time to create a clone when compared to a droid, they also required a massive amount of resources to grow, train, and needed to be supplied on the battlefield and also have living quarters when they weren't fighting. While it took at least 9 years to fully train a clone, it took just minutes to create a B1 battle droid. And no matter how much better a clone is at fighting, he'll never be able to beat 100 droids. Now, I understand why the Republic needed an immediate reaction force to counter the Separatist droid army, but I don't understand why the Republic leaders didn't look at alternative soldiers to supplement their clone army. The one real advantage that the Republic had was its population. They greatly outnumbered the Separatist alliance. Maybe the Galactic Republic exists in a more enlightened period than our own, where citizens no longer need to fight in wars to defend their own homes. Maybe the senators realized that asking their constituents to fight would be political suicide. But I'm not talking about a draft, but maybe just asking for volunteers. I'm sure there are plenty of people who were patriotic enough to join, or just were looking for an adventure, or maybe a way to better their own lives through service. That, or I'm sure you could just go to the lower levels of Coruscant and press some sewer rats into service as cannon fodder. The point is, let's not pretend that life was not cheap in the Galactic Republic. Sure, you had the rich and powerful and the middle class who elected the Senate, but what about the vast amount of people living outside the system in impoverished conditions? To them, 3 square meals a day and some weapons training might be a step up in life. The Separatists were using battle droids. Well, they were really repurposed security droids. So why wasn't the Republic looking into supplementing their forces with machines as well? Again, extremely cheap and quick to produce, and like the clones, they had no rights and didn't vote, so it didn't really matter if a massive amount of them ended up getting destroyed. Now, I'm aware that many of the leading droid manufacturing companies of the Techno Union left the Republic to join the Separatists, but the Republic still had massive manufacturing capabilities and many defense companies like Quant Engineering, Corellian Engineering, Blastech, and Arakid Industries. But instead of looking into creating a battle droid, they fielded costly weapons platforms like the ARC-170 Recon Fighter, which was not only extremely slow, but had 3 live clones on board, and these created easy targets for the much cheaper droid fighters. The whole point of the Ruusan Reformation was not to destroy the Republic's ability to defend itself, but to decentralize all military funding. This, in theory, would maintain the Republic's many regions' ability to protect itself while decreasing the chance of an all-out galactic war and oppression by the federal government. But of course, this only works on paper. In practice, things are a lot more tricky. Although funding was redirected to fund local defense forces, enforcement of how these funds were to be spent was lax. And over the year, galactic-wide peace and lack of conflict saw the funding that was originally slated for defense to be repurposed for other projects and ambitions. After 1,000 years of peace and stagnation, I'm sure most regions and planets either failed to meet their necessary defensive spending quotas or just plain got rid of them. This is why during the Clone Wars we rarely ever see any planetary defense forces, and the ones we usually do see are under-equipped and serving more as police forces rather than a proper military defensive unit. The Republic was at a huge disadvantage in this war. Not only were they outnumbered by the droid army, they also had a massive amount of territory to defend. Whenever they moved their small grand army of the Republic to one world, it left several other worlds wide open to attack. In the beginning of the war, the clones were far too few in number and way too expensive to really serve as frontline units. The first batch of clones numbered only 200,000, and many of them would go on to perish during the Battle of Geonosis due to terrible leadership from the Jedi, and another 1,000,000 clones were on the way. While that easily would outnumber most standing militaries on Earth today, on a galactic-wide scale, it was ridiculously low. That's why oftentimes the Republic was deploying battalions or even just company-sized units to try to claim entire worlds. These clone units would have been put to better use as advisors and trainers in foreign internal defense. Instead of trying to protect the millions of worlds in the Republic, the Senate could have started enforcing defense quotas on these worlds, which really was for their own benefit, especially now that the Separatist army was going around taking over systems. Placing the Jedi in high command positions during the Clone Wars was completely idiotic. The Jedi were excellent combatants, but had next to no experience leading troops into battle, and I'm sure very few understood logistics or strategic planning. As a matter of fact, on some occasions, the Jedi would even place children in command of military units, which, surprise, led to defeat. The Republic still had military academies scattered throughout its systems on more militarized worlds. They also had clones that were ready to be promoted internally to command positions. The clones weren't droids and were fully capable of leading their fellow clones into battle. They all had over 9 years of military training, which was far more than a Jedi had. On top of that, they didn't have any dogmatic religious views that could skew their judgment during combat. While parts of the Techno Union did leave the Galactic Republic, the Trade Federation still stayed in the Senate, despite the fact that they were very obviously working directly with the Separatist Alliance to undermine the Republic's war effort. Isn't it weird that the Trade Federation security forces used during the Naboo crisis have a direct resemblance to the Separatist droid army? Even the tanks that they use are exactly the same. While the Republic probably didn't want to risk losing the Trade Federation, they should have at least posed sanctions and investigated potential ties between the Trade Federation and Separatists. I personally would have at least temporarily banned their representatives from the Senate and used other covert means to stop their meddling. The Separatist droid army had a really clear weakness that really wasn't exploited by the Republic until the latter years of the war. The entirety of their army was made from droids. Droids that were poorly shielded from EMPs and ion weapons. It wasn't until the Battle of Malastare that we actually see larger scale ion weapons being used. This is something that the GAR should have looked into right away. Ion weapons were already available to the wider galaxy and had the added benefit of not damaging organics. It also seemed like most GAR vehicles had decent shielding to EMP and ion weapons, so they could have just went crazy with these kind of weapons if they wanted to, especially when the clones are outnumbered. But instead, the clones fought the droids in conventional battles that very much favored the Separatist droid army. With their greater numbers, the Separatists were able to attack far more worlds than the GAR had the capability to defend. And so, in the beginning of the war, the clones were rushed from one battle to another without respite. A greater focus should have been placed on taking out key enemy commanders with special forces. The Separatist droid army was very much a top-down command structure. Without higher-level command droids or organic commanders, the Separatist army would have seen a great decrease in their efficiency. Although the droid army technically did have NCOs, they were hardly any different from your average rank-and-file battle droid, and their grasp of tactics was limited at best. This should have been the main job of the Jedi and other Republic special forces like the Clone Commandos. Killing off their commanders, the GAR would have had a much easier time slowing down the Separatist droid army and would have prevented them from fielding new army groups. And at the end of the war, the Separatist High Command surrendered and then issued a signal galaxy-wide that shut down most of the droids. It's surprising that the Republic wasn't able to figure out that the battle droids had this kill switch. They had access to endless amounts of battle droids on the battlefield and could have taken them apart to discover any weaknesses they might have had. Instead of just using conventional weapons to destroy the droid, they could have found the kill switch, or they could have developed viruses or figured out a way to jam the droid's communications. It just seems like a missed opportunity to not look at these alternative ways to fight droids. So guys, that's our analysis of the Grand Army of the Republic. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Had Palpatine not been playing both sides, do you think the GAR still would have won? Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.